My good friend Emily, she's always been the adventurous type, always looking for a new place to camp, a new trail to hike. This one time, she and her small group, her boyfriend, Liam, and another couple, Chloe and Ben, decided to go for a weekend camping trip to the Blackwood River National Forest. It's a huge, sprawling area, mostly wilderness, with the wide, slow-moving Blackwood River snaking through it. They'd gotten a permit for a designated camping area, but as often happens, they arrived a bit later than planned on the Friday evening, and it was already getting dark by the time they found the general vicinity. The specific campsite they were aiming for was supposed to be right by the river, but in the fading light and with the confusing network of small dirt roads, they ended up setting up their tents a little further downstream, in a clearing that seemed okay if a bit closer to a marshy, less appealing section of the riverbank. As they were unloading their gear, an old pickup truck rattled past on the nearby dirt road. The driver, a weathered-looking local man with a face like a road map, slowed down, rolled down his window, and gave them a long, appraising look. "You folks planning on camping right there?" he asked, his voice raspy. Liam, being the designated spokesman, said, "Yeah, just for the weekend. Is this spot okay?" The old man spat a stream of tobacco juice onto the dirt. "Suppose it's all right. Just, this here stretch of river down past the old logging bridge. It's kind of known as the night fisherman's spot. They don't much like company, especially strangers. Best to keep to yourselves, not wander too far after dark. Some things in these woods are best left alone." He gave them another long look, then just nodded curtly and drove off, leaving them feeling a bit uneasy. "Night fisherman?" Chloe whispered, "What's that supposed to mean?" They all sort of laughed it off, figuring he was just a quirky local trying to spook the city folk. Or maybe referring to people who fish illegally for protected species at night. They set up their tents, got a small campfire going, cooked dinner. The woods around them were dark and silent, except for the usual night sounds: crickets, the distant hoot of an owl, the gentle murmur of the river. Around 2 a.m., Emily was jolted awake. She wasn't sure what woke her, but she had that antsy, on-edge feeling. Then she heard it. The very faint, almost imperceptible sound of a boat engine, but not a normal, loud outboard. This was a low, muffled thrum, like an electric trolling motor or a very well-silenced gas engine. It was coming from the river, very close to their campsite. She carefully unzipped her tent a crack and peered out. Through the trees, she could see faint, flickering lights on the water, moving slowly, silently past their clearing. Then she heard low, guttural voices, men talking in hushed, urgent tones, too indistinct to make out words, but definitely not the sounds of recreational fishermen. The lights, probably flashlights, swept across the riverbank, and for a terrifying moment, a bright beam cut directly through their campsite, illuminating their tents for a few seconds before snapping off. Emily's heart leaped into her throat. She held her breath, praying they hadn't been seen, or if they had, that these night fishermen would just move on. The boat, or boats, continued silently downstream and the sounds faded. The rest of the group had slept through it. In the morning, Emily told them what she'd heard and seen. Liam was skeptical. "Probably just some guys doing some late-night catfishing. They use quiet motors and a light. Probably just scanning the banks for good spots." But Chloe and Ben looked a bit more spooked. As they were packing up their gear to leave later that morning, Ben, who had wandered down to the riverbank to get a better look, called out, "Hey guys, come check this out. This is weird." They all went down. There, in the soft mud at the river's edge, were fresh, deep boot prints. Large ones, definitely made by men. They weren't from their group. The prints led from the water, circled their campsite, at a distance of about 20 yards, then went back toward the water a little further downstream. It was as if someone had silently gotten out of a boat, scouted their position, and then left. And then they found the other things, tucked partially under a bush near where the boot prints re-entered the water, as if dropped or forgotten in a hurry. A single, recently fired 12-gauge shotgun shell, still smelling faintly of cordite. A length of thick, new-looking nylon rope, about 20 feet long, coiled neatly. And a crumpled, empty pack of foreign-looking cigarettes. A brand none of them recognized with no warning labels. A cold dread settled over the group. This wasn't about fishing. The silent boat, the scouting boot prints, the shotgun shell, the rope, it all painted a very different, very sinister picture. These night fishermen were clearly involved in something serious, something illegal, and they definitely didn't want witnesses. The old man's warning suddenly felt less like quirky local color and more like a genuine, understated threat. They had unknowingly camped right in the middle of, or very close to, these people's operational zone. The light sweeping their tents hadn't been accidental. It had been a deliberate check. And the items left behind, maybe a careless mistake, or maybe a very subtle, very chilling unspoken warning. We know you were here. Don't come back. They packed up in record time, practically throwing their gear into their cars, all conversation ceasing, replaced by furtive, scared glances towards the river and the dark woods. On the drive out, they didn't see the old man or his truck. When Emily told me this story later, her voice was still shaky. We told the park rangers when we got back to the main office, she said. Showed them the shotgun shell and the rope. They listened, took notes, said they'd look into it. But they seemed more annoyed about the unauthorized campsite location than about the potential poachers or whatever they were. Her friends, when they recounted the tale to others, got similar reactions. Oh, probably just some local hunters, you know, how those guys are. Or, you were camping where you shouldn't have been. What did you expect? No one seemed to grasp the real palpable fear they had felt, the feeling of having brushed up against something truly dangerous. Something that operated by its own rules in the dark, hidden depths of the forest and the river. Emily and her friends never went camping in Blackwood River National Forest again. They learned that sometimes a vague warning from a local isn't just a story, and that the night fishermen might be fishing for something far more sinister than what swims in the river. And that sometimes the most terrifying thing isn't what you see, but the evidence of what you didn't see. And what might have happened if those silent watchers had decided their accidental audience was a threat that needed to be silenced permanently. I've always loved kayaking. The solitude of it, just you and the water and the quiet sounds of nature. I heard about this stretch of the Blackwood River, a remote, narrow section that winds through deep gorges and dense, old-growth forest. It was supposed to be beautiful, but also a bit tricky. The locals had their stories, of course. They said that sometimes if you were out there alone, especially in the misty early mornings or late afternoons, you hear things, voices, calling out from the woods, from the high cliffs. Sometimes your name, sometimes just a cry for help. But if you tried to find the source, you'd find nothing. Just the trees, the rocks, the river. Some said it was the wind playing tricks with the echoes in the gorge. Others whispered it was something else, something that liked to lure people off the main river, deeper into the woods. I'm not usually one for spooky stories, but I'm also not an idiot. I went well prepared. GPS, map, compass, extra food and water, let someone know my route and expected return time. It was a stunningly beautiful day. The river a dark, clear ribbon cutting through the wilderness. For the first few hours, it was bliss. Just the dip of my paddle, the cry of a hawk overhead, the scent of pine and damp earth. Then, as I rounded a sharp bend, the gorge walls rising steeply on either side, I heard it, a faint call. Hello? Hello there. It sounded like a man's voice, a little distant, a little muffled, coming from somewhere up on the wooded ridge to my right. I stopped paddling, listened. Hello? I called back. My voice echoed strangely. Help, help me. The voice came again, weaker this time, definitely sounding distressed. My first instinct was to help. Someone was in trouble. I scanned the dense tree line on the ridge. Couldn't see a thing. Where are you? I shouted. Can you see me? Up here. Twisted my ankle. Can't walk. The voice seemed to be a little further away now, a little more to my left, as if moving. That was odd. I started to paddle towards the bank, looking for a place to land my kayak and scramble up. The current was strong here, pulling me downstream. The voice called again. This way. Follow the sound. It definitely seemed to be leading me towards a small, dark tributary that fed into the main river, a narrow, overgrown channel that looked almost impassable. A little alarm bell went off in my head. The stories, the luring voices. This felt a bit too much like those tailies. And why would someone with a twisted ankle be moving around? Can you make your way to the main riverbank? I called out. It's too dangerous for me to come up there if I can't see you. Silence for a moment. Then, no, can't move. Please, getting dark soon. The voice sounded more pathetic now, more desperate. But it still seemed to be coming from the direction of that dark tributary. I hesitated. Every instinct was screaming at me to be cautious. This was a very remote area. If this was a trap, I was completely alone. I remembered the local advice. If you hear calls, stay on the main river. Don't follow them into the woods. Then I heard another sound. From a completely different direction, further downstream, on the other side of the river. A similar voice, also sounding distressed. Hey, over here. I need help. Now I was seriously confused and scared. Two people needing help on opposite sides of the river in different locations. That didn't make any sense unless it wasn't two different people. Unless the sound was being deliberately thrown. Or I was hearing echoes from multiple points or something else. I decided to stay put for a minute, just listen. The calls continued, one from the right, one from the left, sometimes overlapping, sometimes seeming to answer each other, but always with that same undertone of distress, always trying to draw me towards the banks, towards the trees. And then I heard something else, something that made my blood run cold. A low chuckle, just a single, soft, almost inaudible chuckle from somewhere very close by on my right, from the dense bush right at the water's edge. It wasn't one of the calling voices. It was different, and it was definitely not distressed. That was it. This wasn't a rescue mission. This was something else entirely. I dug my paddle into the water and started paddling downstream as fast as I possibly could, away from the tributary, away from the echoing calls, away from that chilling chuckle. The voices followed me for a while, still calling, still pleading, sometimes sounding angry now, frustrated. But I didn't look back. I just paddled, my arms burning, my heart pounding, until I was well out of the gorge, and into a wider, more open stretch of the river. When I finally made it back to the takeout point, hours later, shaken and exhausted, I told the guy at the kayak rental place what had happened. He was a local, an old-timer. He just nodded slowly, his face grim. Ah, the Blackwood echoes, he said. Heard them myself a few times when I was younger. Most folks say it's just the wind or hunters trying to spook people out of their favorite spots. Others say it's something else. Something that likes to play games. Something that doesn't like to be ignored. He wouldn't say more. My friends, when I told them, mostly thought I'd let the local stories get to me. Dude, it was probably just echoes like the rental guy said. Or other kayakers further up or down the river, and the sound was bouncing around the gorge. You were alone, it's easy to get spooked. Maybe they were right. Maybe it was just echoes or other people or my imagination working overtime in a creepy, isolated place. But that chuckle, that wasn't an echo. And the feeling of being deliberately lured, of being played with, that was very real. I never found out who or what was making those calls in the Blackwood River Gorge. But I know I came very close to following them. And I have a chilling feeling that if I had, I might have become another one of those stories the locals tell. Another whisper in the woods, another echo that never quite fades away. It makes you think twice about answering a voice in the wilderness, because you never know who or what might be calling. I'm a solitary kind of guy, especially when it comes to fishing. My idea of a perfect Saturday is heading out alone to some quiet stretch of the old Willow River. The part that winds through the dense, state-owned Blackwood forest, miles from any road or house. Just me, my rod, and the sounds of nature. It's peaceful, or it usually is. This one particular Saturday, I was fishing a familiar bend, a place where the current slows and deep pools form. Good for catfish. The forest here is thick, the banks overgrown. It was a gray, overcast day, the kind where the silence feels heavier. I wasn't having much luck, just enjoying the quiet, when I saw something bobbing in the current near the far bank, caught in some reeds. It looked like a bottle. Curiosity got the better of me. I reeled in my line, carefully made my way across some slippery rocks, and managed to snag it with the tip of my rod. It was an old-style glass soda bottle, green, with a cork jammed in the top. And inside, I could see a small, tightly rolled piece of paper. Now, I've heard stories, messages in bottles, usually romantic stuff or kids playing. But this felt different. The bottle was old, covered in algae. The cork was wedged in tight, sealed with what looked like wax. This wasn't a casual toss into the river. My hands were actually trembling a bit as I worked the cork out. The paper inside was damp, fragile, a bit yellowed. I unrolled it carefully. The writing was in pencil, smudged and faint, clearly done in a hurry or by someone under duress. It wasn't long, just a few lines, and it made my blood run cold. It read, "Help, trapped. Cabin by Twin Oaks, upstream, north bank. He watches. Don't let him see you." Meh. I read it again, then again. Cabin by Twin Oaks, upstream, north bank. I knew that area, or at least I knew of it. It was a notoriously remote, almost inaccessible part of the Blackwood forest, a good 5 or 6 miles further upstream from where I was. There were old logging trails back there, mostly overgrown now. And there were local whispers, the kind of stories that get passed around in hushed tones about a curse or forbiddance section of the forest up that way, a place where people had supposedly gone missing years ago, or where strange lights were sometimes seen. Some said it was an old moonshiner's hideout, still guarded. Others said something far worse. And, It didn't mean anything to me. My first thought was, this has to be a hoax. Some kid's playing a prank, or an old message that's been floating around for years. But the urgency in those scrawled words, he watches. Don't let him see you. felt chillingly real. And the detail, cabin by Twin Oaks, that felt specific. What was I supposed to do? Ignore it? Call the police? What would I tell them? I found this weird note in a bottle. Sounds like a B movie plot. They'd laugh me out of the station. I had no proof it was current. No proof it was even real. But what if it was real? What if someone, Mar, was genuinely trapped in danger right now, just a few miles upriver? The thought was horrifying. The responsibility felt immense. I sat there by the river for a long time, the note clutched in my hand, my fishing forgotten. The forest around me, usually so peaceful, suddenly felt menacing, full of unseen eyes. Was he watching me right now, knowing I'd found the message? I'm not a hero. I'm just a guy who likes to fish. But I couldn't just do nothing. I decided I had to at least check it out from a safe distance. I knew a ridge that overlooked that part of the North Bank, though it was a hard climb. It took me over an hour of cautious hiking, constantly looking over my shoulder to reach the ridge. From there, with my binoculars, I scanned the dense tree line along the river. And then I saw it. Tucked away, almost completely hidden by overgrown bushes and a couple of massive, distinctive twin oak trees, was a small, dilapidated log cabin. Smoke, very faint, was curling from its stone chimney. Someone was there. I didn't see any sign of Mar, or anyone who looked like they were in distress. I didn't see him either. Just the cabin, silent and isolated, looking like it had been there for 100 years, or like it had just materialized. I didn't dare go any closer. The words from the note he watches echoed in my mind. I took a few photos with my phone, though the distance and the trees made them blurry and inconclusive. Then I got the hell out of there, back to my car, back to civilization. I did call the county sheriff's office when I got home. I told them the story about the bottle, the note, the cabin. I emailed them the photos. The dispatcher sounded bored, but said they'd log the information. I don't know if they ever sent anyone to check it out. I never heard anything back. My friends, when I told them, were divided. Some thought it was a fascinating mystery, maybe a genuine cry for help. Others, the majority, thought it was an elaborate prank, or that I'd let my imagination run wild after finding an old, meaningless note. Dude, someone probably wrote that years ago, or it's just kids messing around. A cabin in the woods? So cliche. I don't know what the truth is. Was real? Were they saved? Or was it all just a strange, unsettling coincidence? A piece of riverborne fiction? But sometimes when I'm out fishing, I still look at the bottles floating by, and I wonder. And I never go too far upstream on the old Willow River anymore, especially not towards the North Bank near those Twin Oaks. Because whether it was real or not, that note, that feeling of a desperate plea from somewhere dark and hidden, it changed the way I see the quiet places. It made me realize that the river carries more than just water. It carries secrets, and sometimes those secrets are terrifying. And sometimes a message found is a burden you can't easily set down, especially when no one else believes it's real.